This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. NBA rolling hard, man. Got so much stuff happening right now as we lead into the next couple of weeks before NBA All-Star Weekend. So much is going down, man, and it's just really an exciting time to be an NBA head. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw, ripping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Welcome back, Mr. Shaw. I heard the Islands was treating you iron, man.
It was live, my dude, and I want to thank all the fans, listeners, supporters who wished us well on our journey as I embarked and tied the knot, so to speak, and went to Barbados and all that afterwards. But I'm back.
It's great to be back. I'm just letting you know, though, I'm a little salty, man. I didn't get any feedback, from you about how, I did, with the show, holding it down while you were out there living it up on the islands.
Oh man, well, I think our listeners can attest to that you did an amazing job. I checked it out while I was on the beach, not even going front, had my feet up, had my toes in the sand.
Yeah, I saw your Baywatch slow motion. You know what I'm saying? I was saying, like, you had to throw up the people's eyebrow as you were ready to jump into the water. So
you know what it is. You know exactly what it is, man. But yeah, man, you held that down. Great conversation on Kyrie, Dennis Smith Jr. and all that, man. And so again, I wish I could have been a part of it too, because I definitely had some thoughts as you was giving the butter goods on it, man, and threw a nice little clip out there as well too. So hope everybody tuned in and listened to my man last week as he held it down solo dolo. But as we allude to it, salute to all the fans listeners of NBA Baseline. I'm back in full effect, ready to rock for this week's episode.
Definitely, man. And we got a lot of stuff to get into. In a few moments, we will have our special guest, Phil Watson from Nothing But Nets. He covers the Brooklyn Nets. We're going to be talking about how the Brooklyn Nets is shaking things up in the Eastern Conference. So you don't want to miss out on that. And in our topic of the drop, we're going to be talking about the rumors happening out in Memphis with Mike Conley, Marc Gasol on the trading block, and also the season-ending injury with Victor Oladipo. What that may also mean with the likes of guys like Mike Conley and Marc Gasol on the trading block. So a lot of stuff for us to get into. Once again, we appreciate you and yours for tuning into the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at GameFace Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. Available on all the major platforms. Download any of those platforms. Lock us in. Allow us to be your go-to resource discussing all things happening in the association. You know where to find us. If you are Dash Radio, our Dashers know to catch us on Nothing But Net Radio, Tuesday mornings, 9 a.m. Let us be your morning ride to get you live for the NBA week. You know how we do. You know how we roll. Let's get it started with the breakdown.
Time to break it down.
Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warren Shaw of the Baseline NBA podcast. And the topic of conversation for the breakdown, and it's about damn time, the Brooklyn Nets. That's right. I said it. The Brooklyn Nets. They're no longer one of those, kicking those teams that the top teams have to, kick around throughout the course of the regular season, up their win totals in order to position themselves in the playoffs. Matter of fact, the Brooklyn Nets are a legitimate threat to the top teams in the Atlantic Division. And here to talk about this team, to talk about the growth of this team, we have one of the premier bloggers. He is also one of the premier front people that covers the Brooklyn Nets. You can catch their blog, Nothing But Nets, fan-sided blog. It's Phil Watson. Phil, thank you for hopping on board with us this week to talk about your Brooklyn Nets and the damage they are doing to the Eastern Conference, my friend.
Hey, I appreciate the invitation. And yeah, they're on a historic roll right now. The last 24 games are the best 24-game stretch in franchise history. So, 19-5 since December 7th. That's it's gone past a point where, wow, this is a nice little streak, to, wow, this is a pretty good team.
Phil, the first thing that I want to know from you is, what is driving this narrative about the Brooklyn Nets and this historic run? What is it that has clicked in this season that you're seeing from this team that has given us this comfort level about them really making a solid push throughout the rest of the regular season and to be relevant in this conversation about of a playoff push?
They took their lumps early, and they've learned the lessons that they needed to learn. The young teams have to go through a process of taking a lot of losses and some really gut punching tough losses, in order to mature to the point where they're able to close out games, win games, make playoff berths, that sort of thing. Last year, the Nets made considerable progress. They brought a lot of the key players back this year, young guys, and things were not rosy at all. Early in the year, they had the 8-game losing streak. They blew 4 double-digit leads during the 8-game losing streak. They had trouble closing out games when they were ahead. The Oklahoma City game on December 5th is when everything switched. They blew a 23-point lead. Paul George went insane in the fourth quarter. They lost at home. It was, I believe it was their 6th or 7th straight loss at home, 8th loss in a row overall. And then they had the film session. They had a players-only film session the day after the Oklahoma City loss. And since then, there has been just a greater sense of urgency when they play with a lead late in the game, more confidence in the individual members of the team to, the guys are going to be in the right place, do their job. Guys aren't pressing as much in key situations because they trust that the guys on the floor with them are going to do what they need to do as well. That's been the biggest adjustment. They've learned how to close out games.
So this team, nothing is super statistically great about them. I mean, they're 13th in offensive rating. They're, somewhere in the middle, lower third, I think, in defensive rating currently. They do rebound the ball pretty well. And one of the things that I think that shocks me about this, though, is that they've had a lot of injuries. And Atkinson has really been able to plug and play multiple guys, no matter who it is. And multiple guys have played a role and played key roles for this team throughout the course of the season. You just talk a little bit about what that is like around this Brooklyn roster and what Atkinson has done to make sure everybody's always prepared and he can always get the most whenever he puts those guys out there for whatever minutes.
Atkinson, I think, has got to be in the Coach of the Year conversation at some point. Karis LeVert was supposed to be the best player on the team, and early in the season he played like he was the best player on the team. He hasn't played since November 12th. The Nets were 2-10 to begin without him. They are now 21-15 since LeVert was hurt. They've been without Alan Crabb for long periods of time. Rondé Hollis-Jefferson has been in and out. Damari Carroll missed a lot of time early in the year. But what they have is they have a tight-knit group and a next man up mentality. I mean, against the Knicks on Friday, Spencer Dinwiddie was out. And Shabazz Napier came in and scored 18 points off the bench, did a lot of the same things that Dinwiddie does to break down a defense with his ball penetration and, get the ball into the paint, kick it back out. And one of the two-way players, Theo Pinson, went for 19 points in that game. Where did that come from?
Right.
They have guys that believe in the system, and they're playing as a unit probably better than the sum of their parts. And D'Angelo Russell deserves a lot of credit for what he's done over the last month and a half with stepping up, cutting down the turnovers, playing the type of game that people expected he would be able to play. But it's a learning process for young point guards. He's in his 4th year. He's starting to figure it out.
I'm glad you actually brought up two players that I'd certainly want to hopefully be able to discuss at some point. But I actually want to touch on something with D'Angelo Russell and roll with me on this theory here.
Sure.
Because I was very high on D'Angelo Russell when he came out of Ohio State. I thought that it was a good move for the Los Angeles Lakers to get a guy like D'Angelo Russell because I thought maybe him as a point guard is what they needed. But I thought it was a mistake for D'Angelo Russell to play for the Los Angeles Lakers. Because when I think about guys that come out of these Midwest schools, not a lot of these guys know how to play in those programs that are traditional big market programs. Los Angeles Lakers, Boston Celtics, New York Knicks. When you put a guy like D'Angelo Russell, like Victor Oladipo, in the smaller market places where there's not a whole lot of pressure and highlight, this gives them an opportunity to fly under the radar and do exactly what we're seeing from him this season. I don't think that this is, by happenstance what we're seeing from D'Angelo Russell, but I think the combination of Atkinson and his understanding of where he wants to be in this NBA and who he's playing for to elevate that level to it, I think is speaking volumes. Is that what you're seeing from a guy like D'Angelo Russell that's making this relationship work, and it obviously is now exponentially elevating the Brooklyn Nets to that next level of being a dangerous team in the Eastern Conference?
I definitely believe that's some of it. I mean, he was a kid from Louisville, Kentucky. That got noticed at some of the All American or the elite camps when he was in high school. Ended up going to the Montverde Academy in Florida, which turns out a lot of finished players toward college. He was a one and done at Ohio State, and then he ended up with the Lakers, one of the most decorated franchises in the NBA, but one that was at one of the worst moments the lowest points they've ever been at. And there was tremendous pressure on not just Russell, but all of the young high draft picks that the Lakers have been bringing in to, you're going to be the guy that immediately flips the switch and we turn this around. And then they bring in another one in. Okay, you're the guy who's going to be the one to immediately flip the switch and we turn it around. And the NBA doesn't work like that, especially not with the point guard position. There is so much that a player has to learn as a point guard at the NBA level. Giving the kid 2 years and shipping him out to the Nets, I mean, you can say what you want to about Magic Johnson's knowledge of the game. It's impeccable, but I've always found it a mistake to give up on a young point guard after 2 years. You got to give these kids time, a kid like this time to develop, especially a guy who came into the league when he was 19.
So he is, obviously playing at a level where now I think he's even garnering some all-star level consideration, but it took him a little while to get going even this year, as you alluded to, right? And to the beginning of the year, you mentioned Karis LeVert was kind of really carrying this team, but kind of a consistent off the bench the entire year has been Spencer Dinwiddie, right? So with Dinwiddie's now injury out, what is it, 3 to 6 weeks potentially right now?
3 to 6 weeks is what they're saying, yeah.
Where do you feel like you mentioned Shabazz stepped up in the last game, but do you feel like that's somebody who can now be consistent? And just talk a little bit about how much Spencer Dinwiddie means to this team and how he's able to take some pressure off of D'Angelo Russell when he's healthy.
The biggest adjustment, and this is one of the big things that's happened over this last 24-game stretch, is that Russell and Dinwiddie aren't competing with each other anymore. They have really learned to mold their games together to the point where you can play them together effectively. That wasn't always the case the first year and a half they were together. Stylistically, they're different enough that they should be able to play together, but each of them was trying to, be the guy who was going to be the guy, if you get what I'm saying. And now I think they've reached a point. D'Angelo Russell coined a great phrase about the two of them. They're the two-headed snake. So the Nets have lost one of the heads of that snake with Dinwiddie being out, but Napier is an NBA level point guard. He can penetrate defensively. He can give up some things because of his lack of size, but he penetrates. He handles the ball well. He knows how to get his own shot. He's gotten better as the year has progressed at finding teammates, and that's not something we've always seen from Napier in terms of his playmaking ability. So that was encouraging. I think it's in there, but he's always going to be a guy who's going to be a score-first guy. It was in his DNA when he was at Connecticut. and it is kind of what he is as a basketball player. He's going to get his points, and he's going to create opportunities for others with the spacing that he creates.
Phil Watson joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Be sure to catch him on Twitter at Phil Watson FS. The blog, Nothing But Nets, at Nets Blog FS. So one of the amazing things about this team also, I mean, we can sit here and just roll out the accolades about what this Brooklyn Nets team is doing for this season. But one of the most impressive things is just the depth and contributions that have been made by this team. You mentioned a little earlier before about Theo Pinson's play. And, there's been a lot of talk, especially from NBA insiders like Ian Begley, who were really impressed with his defensive versatility and the fact that the kid can shoot the basketball. And it's almost a foregone conclusion that they expect this guy to be on board throughout the course of the season and hopefully long term. What is it about Kenny Atkinson's ability to churn out this, the kind of productivity that he's getting from his bench players?
Well, Atkinson was a player development guy from the time he came into the NBA with Houston about 9-10 years ago. He had 4 years with Mike D'Antoni with the Knicks, which is kind of where he picked up the pace and space system that he runs now. Then he was with Budenholzer in Atlanta for 3 or 4 years before he got the job in Brooklyn. But he is first and foremost a player development guy, particularly with point guards. He played a dozen years overseas as a point guard. Played Division I ball at Richmond as a point guard. Didn't quite have the size, the talent. If there was a G League back then, he would probably have gotten a shot at the NBA at some point. Because he was a heady player, not an overwhelming physical talent, but he understood how to play the game. And he's terrific at passing that along, particularly to his point guards. But, there are guys at other positions that have been developing further faster than expected. Jared Allen, what he's done as a number 22 overall pick in his second year, there's an emerging star getting ready to happen there because he's fearless defensively. Joe Harris got cut by the Orlando Magic 3 years ago. He's one of the top 3 or 4 3-point shooters in the NBA now. Spencer Dinwiddie was a guy that got traded by the Pistons, cut by the Bulls 3 years ago. And now he's, a 3-year, $34 million extension player. And Rodions Kurucs, I can't forget to mention what an absolute shock he has been. 40th overall pick in the draft last June, played 44 minutes for Barcelona last year in Spain because they were upset that he had NBA aspirations and they didn't play him. For this kid to be coming in and starting the last 21 games for this team, he's averaging almost double figures, even though he was out of the rotation for much of the first part of the season. He's got great length. He's got great burst. He blows people away with how quick his first step is off the drive, and he's absolutely fearless. He should get a look at the Rising Stars game. Don't know if he will, but boy, it would be a shame if they left him out because he's a starter on a team that's gone 16-5 with him in the lineup as a 20-year-old 40th overall pick. You don't get that a lot out of the draft.
I think that's a great point about Cruz there. I mean, again, I just remember turning on my TV a couple weeks ago and I was like, who the hell is this guy? But he started the ball, he was rebounding, he can shoot it. I mean, like I saw D'Angelo drive, lots of driving kicks out to him, and he's fearless. I mean, he's playing with a lot of great confidence. But that brings me to, I guess, another question, and maybe the elephant in the room here a little bit, kind of what we started out with, right? Karis LeVert eventually due back this year. DeMarre Carroll should be back this year, we think.
DeMarre Carroll has been back for a while.
Right,
he missed like the first month of the season after the ankle procedure.
How does that all impact what this team is going to do? Because now these guys who've been getting these roles and getting these minutes Now these veteran guys come back. How do you think that impacts what Brooklyn has, the success they've seen thus far? Does it deter them a little bit, or does it negate some of the great chemistry that they've built amongst themselves and goodwill throughout the season?
I don't believe it does, because if you look at games, the guys that have been out of the lineup are right there in the middle of the celebrations. They're right there with the team. LeVert is on the bench every night, and not just sitting there, but he's active. He's talking to guys. He's helping guys. Crab, you're seeing the same thing with him. Atkinson kind of has a policy with guys who have been out for long durations, that they don't immediately come back and jump back into the starting lineup.
I was just
Not all
about to
coaches
ask you.
do that.
I was just about to ask you that question, Phil, and I'm so glad you brought that, because that to me is one of the more intriguing, I quote unquote, questions that do kind of run around in the circles of the NBA. That is, it out of loyalty that guys who have been out for extended period of time, at you know sacrifice the success that the team has generated, the chemistry that's generated, what this stretch of games that the Brooklyn Nets have done. Do you just start putting guys like Carroll, who I'm sure would want to be and is getting paid like he should be a starter? Do you just throw these guys in and automatically have them starting or taking up the same minutes that you're getting productivity from the guys who have stepped in and have filled in those roles while they were out?
Right. Atkinson does not operate that way. If like Joe Harris missed 3 games with a hip injury back in late November, early December, he immediately went back into the lineup when he was healthy. But when Rondé Hollis Jefferson had been out with the adductor all preseason, it was 20 games before he got a start. He worked off the bench. His minutes were gradually increased. Crab came off the bench when he came back early in the year. That's the way the Nets operate. Last year, when D'Angelo Russell was coming back from the knee, the first 13 games he was back, he came off the bench to get minutes, to get reacclimated, to get back into game condition, because there's only so much you can simulate in practice. Game speed is a very different thing, and Atkinson doesn't like to throw guys right back into the starting lineup after they haven't played for a month or 2 or 3 or however long the gap's been. He wants to give guys a fair chance to build back up to that.
Well, and let me jump in real quick, because we had Spencer on our show earlier in the year, and I remember one thing he said poignantly. He said, listen, we all know we're not going to get out there and play 30, 35 minutes a night. He's going to keep us somewhere in that 26 to 27 minute range. And you look across this team, and everyone, like, no one is exactly to it, but no one's quite there. So he seems to have gotten that message across. You know what I mean? So even when you come back from injury, you're gonna have to work your way into it. And I think that is, like as you alluded to, seems to be something that could be a saving grace, that this is, maybe a collegial environment, so to speak. They're playing well. Everyone knows the role and is doing things the right way. One of the things that really impresses me, though, this team has like 8-9 guys averaging like 9 points a game, in these 20 plus minutes that they're getting. This type of just across the board production is really unheard of, for a lot of teams right now. And it's a different model. And we've talked a lot about what Atkins just touched on a little bit. Sean Marks up there, as the general manager, president of basketball operations, whatever, kind of what he's done to make sure that these pieces fit after inheriting the mess that was the Brooklyn Nets before he got there.
Well, the biggest thing that Mark's wanted to do, and culture, that is his word, wanting to create a winning culture. And coming as he did from San Antonio, where he was an assistant coach and then the assistant GM for several years. There's not a lot of teams in the league that have a deeper, richer culture than San Antonio has. And he's trying to replicate that in Brooklyn. Atkinson was the first coach he hired, and they are in lockstep on that sense that you need a deep roster, that you need, that in the absence of superstar players, you have to put together a roster 10, 11, 12 guys deep where everybody can play their role properly. That's how you compete if you don't have superstars. And what we've got right now is a team with 10 guys averaging at least 9 points a game, and nobody averaging more than 29.8 minutes, because they're a team that right now doesn't have the superstar pieces. The biggest thing Marks did in the offseason was improve the depth. Ed Davis might have been the single most important free agent signing outside of that top tier of superstars last summer of any team anywhere in the NBA, because they were a black hole at center behind whoever was starting last year. Last year Jared Allen started the last 31 games, but before that, they were running Tyler Zeller out there, Timothy Mozgov, Jahlil Okafor. I mean, if you got and late in the year when they took Allen out of games, they had nothing in the middle to counter with. You could just beat up the Nets inside last year, and with Ed Davis there and what he's been able to do to help Jared Allen develop, you can't do that anymore. You can't just dump the ball down low on the Nets and expect that everything's going to go your way anymore. They're much more physical. He added guys like Napier. He brought in Jared Dudley, who was a contract dump from Phoenix. He has provided some valuable minutes, and even more than that, leadership in the locker room, leadership on the bench, and a sense of accountability that may not have always been there. Damari Carroll being willing to move into a bench role and get comfortable with it and stay there. Spencer Dinwiddie struggled at times last year when he was moved back to the bench. He's come in this year accepting that that's going to be his role. And, until the thumb injury, he was in the Sixth Man of the Year conversation. That's the sort of environment that Marks and Atkinson are creating around this team. If you come to Brooklyn, you will get a chance to play. We don't bring anybody here just to bring a guy here. These are the type of additions that Mark's made over the summer that have created the depth that you see that's carrying the Nets through this rash. It's been a season-long rash of injuries. They haven't had a fully healthy roster for a single game this year.
Well, and that's a good point. And before we close out, with the depth of this roster, everything that they've been through, how do they now manage the rest of this regular season? Next year, only $54 million of committed salary. Allen Crabbe will probably opt in to that 18.5, all things considered. But do you see this team? Do you see this team sticking together as is for the rest of this year, and Marks and Atkinson just playing it out, saying, hey, we have a good thing going, whatever, the chips fall where they fall and we'll figure it out? Or do they try to move people and actually try to get better this season, try to make maybe even a deeper playoff run? What do you think they're going to do when it comes to the trade deadline?
They may want to look for some depth before the deadline in the backcourt. Because actually I looked at the injury report for tomorrow in Boston. Harris is questionable. Graham is questionable. So at that point, the guard rotation is Russell, Napier, Pinson, and wow. So, they may want to look at moving somebody to get a point guard or a combo guard type in. But I still believe this is going to be an extremely tough trade market. Everybody has cap space for next season that they want to preserve. Everybody is over the cap right now. They don't want to take on money that extends beyond this year. And 47% of the league is on an expiring deal or a player option. I just think the pieces for making even minor trades are going to be difficult, because teams are not going to want to take salary on unless they pick up a draft pick. And I know that trading a draft pick is not something Marks wants to do. It's been a long wait to get those draft picks back after the Billy King debacle with the Celtics. So I can't imagine a scenario short of a trade that brings in two superstar caliber players where any of the first round picks would be on the table.
Well, the movie was called Patchwork Orange, but this may be called Patchwork Black and White if it's how you're predicting it to be, Phil.
It could very well be. The big thing is just the schedule after the All-Star break, particularly in March, is that's going to be make or break time. They have a 7-game trip with 6 games, I believe, against the Western Conference in the middle of March. So it's good that they're stacking up wins now and getting, where they're now 4 games over 500. They may need that buffer to stay afloat in the race when they have to go out west in March.
He is the man. He definitely has his finger on the pulse of everything that is happening with the Brooklyn Nets. If you don't know, you better recognize the blog is called Nothing But Nets. It's fan-sided. Our man Phil Watson. Phil, we appreciate you so much, man, for coming on board and really highlighting why the Brooklyn Nets are one of the most slept on, but yet the most exciting basketball teams to talk about and watch for this regular season so far, man.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. On the website, it's nothing with no G on it. Nothing but Nets.
Because it's nothing but a G thing. I understand. I got it.
There you go. There you go.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And this was The Breakdown. Time now for The Drop. Callie Warren Shaw of The Baseline NBA podcast. And before we get into our thing with The Drop, Shaw, I got to tell you, I was just really impressed with Phil Watson hopping on board. And, listen, if the Brooklyn Nets were a part of the United States Congress, Phil Watson would be an awesome congressman talking on behalf of the Brooklyn Nets and why people really should start paying attention to how good this basketball team really is. It's just really impressive for what his depth of knowledge, as you've said earlier before, and just the perspective that he is giving about what he sees from this basketball team, which is spot on about why they're legitimately one of the better teams happening right now in the NBA.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. Just having the ability to understand historically what has happened with this franchise from back to Ron Thornton days, to Billy King till now, and even before that, ABA basketball. Phil Watson, a radio guy, out there even in Michigan, but from Jersey originally, really giving us the breadth of knowledge about this Brooklyn Nets. He mentioning two-way guys, some guys that just got called up early in the week. He already has a scouting report on them. So I hope our fans and listeners really enjoyed the Brooklyn Nets conversation, man, because it was a good one.
Definitely. All right, so let's get right into it, man. We have a couple of important topics to discuss this week on The Drop. And, it's ironic because we just finished talking about the Brooklyn Nets and how this is a team that has somehow weathered the storm. A team that is just always constantly has players on the injury list. And now you look at a team like the Memphis Grizzlies, who are starting off within our conversation of The Drop. This is a basketball team that in the beginning of the season, you felt pretty good about knowing that you have 2 solid, all-star caliber players. This was a team that could stay, above water. They have a rookie phenom in Jaren Jackson Jr. And yet this is one of the worst stretches of basketball the Memphis Grizzlies have basically endured. And now, of all of the things that is going on, the Memphis Grizzlies are basically the center of attention because they are not shying away from the idea that they are willing to move their top 2 players in Conley and Gasol. And it just baffles the mind that this is the state of play for the Memphis Grizzlies right now, Shaw.
Yeah, it seemingly comes out of nowhere, but it's not. I mean, if you listen to our show, we're nostalgic, but to a point. And we really just kind of felt like Memphis's time kind of came and went a couple seasons ago. But they stuck with it. And these 2 guys are pillars, not only of this team, but of that community. And while we're not from the Memphis area, we talk a lot of people from there, and we understand what they mean to that city, to that community at large. And I think that's why it's been so hard. But they thought it would be a lot better than they are currently. this upcoming this season right now as we record. 10 games under 500, started off pretty well, but then it's just gone downhill since, and it finally seems like it's time. Wallace and those guys in the front office is like, you know what, they talk to Marc, they talk to Mike, and let them know that they are at least entertaining offers. And this doesn't mean something is going to happen, but it does signify that if something doesn't happen by the trade deadline, that this is most likely the last year that this duo will be together. So I think it's just truly indicative of really and finally the true end of the grit and grind era.
But you know what? Something should happen though, Shaw. Like, I guess that to me is the weird part about all of this, because this has never been the MO of the Memphis Grizzlies and the organization's way of them addressing proposed rumors of players being moved by that basketball team, right? Even when they had Zach Randolph and they had Marc Gasol, right? That when that was grit and grind, right? To me, it just feels very weird that they are just not shying away from the spotlight and the attention of knowing that they have two players that, listen, for all intents purposes, let's not get it twisted. Gasol is going to be the toughest dude to move, because I don't know too many teams right now that's going to be able to use Gasol in the kind of way that Memphis has utilized him to keep him relevant for the money that he's getting paid as a premier center, simply because that position, that role is somewhat obsolete. And unless you play the 4-5 role with versatility, you're getting a solid big. And there's really a lot of the teams that are in the playoff conversation are already set. So it's very limited to see where destination of where you're talking about moving Gasol. But I just lean more to the idea that at the time, if you were going to have those conversations, those would be on the hush tip, rather than it just being out and on front page of every major sports medium that's acknowledging that the Memphis Grizzlies need to move on from one or both of their superstars.
I see what you're saying. I get it, but that doesn't bother me so much, as anything. Is like I do feel like it's time, and for all intents and purposes, they gave it a shot. They gave this season with that group a shot. And it's just one of those things, kind of like the Clippers. It just nothing is ever just going to really be good enough. Something's always going to come up, whether it be injury or there's a mental hump or whatever it is. They're just not going to get to where they want to get to with this group. So with them going out, or at least acknowledging it, hey, this is gonna that they're willing to make these moves. It's just it's 2019. You know what I mean? And these types of things don't often get to be on the hush, as you alluded to. So I think the biggest thing now is just like, what types of packages are they going to be looking for? As you alluded to, Gasol is in the latter stages of his career. Has a pretty hefty contract for the next year, after this one. So most likely will be opting in, but still averaging almost 15, 9, and 5. So can help somebody, but probably not at the same usage that he's getting right now in Memphis. So it'd be interesting to kind of take a look and scan the league at some potential opportunities specifically for Gasol. Conley is at a bigger number, but is younger. And I feel like there might be a little bit of a more of a market for him moving forward. But again, this really is interesting when you talk about Memphis, because back and how fast can they rebuild off the backs of these two guys if they do trade them in the next 2 weeks.
It's just crazy to me, because the Memphis Grizzlies, they're not in the playoff picture, but dude, they're only 8 games, out of, from first place of Houston, right? They're only 2 games behind the New Orleans Pelicans in the in the Southwest Division. And I don't know, maybe I'd imagine more so that Conley and Gasol really would have been a helpful mentor to a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr., right? So now, because you're planning to move these guys, are we saying that the Memphis Grizzlies is solely riding on the momentum and the wave of hype behind what they've been getting from Jaren Jackson Jr.? Which, I mean, look, he's not going to win Rookie of the Year, but he has shown spurts of being an impressive rookie that the Memphis Grizzlies can build towards. And I don't know. I think back to when the San Antonio Spurs, when they had Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili, it took those two dudes to really help Tony Parker come along and really implement himself to be the point of that trifecta that's built that dynasty. Even though Tim Duncan was the man, he was the centerpiece and held everything together. In order to move it to the next step, it took both of the veteran guys that have had so much basketball experience to get Tony Parker at a place where he felt like on his own he felt like he could fit in. I feel like if you're saying that for something like a guy like a Jaren Jackson Jr., at this point, because you didn't move these guys before with Conley and Gasol, that's kind of like the idea, the premise behind what they were trying to do, keeping these guys on with Jaren Jackson at this point.
Well, I think they'll build around Jackson, but also whatever supplemental parts they get in a potential deal with Gasol or Conley. And it's just a matter of preference, really, when it comes to the mentorship thing. I just had an opportunity to interview Garrett Temple a couple of weeks ago. He's on this team, 8-year veteran guy, and I think he could do more than a serviceable job. He's also the vice president of the Players Association, so I think he can do more of a again an admirable job mentoring Jaren Jackson. And I don't think it doesn't need to be all-star to all-star, superstar to all-star, or superstar to rookie to get that mentorship in place. So while I agree Conley and Gasol have been through the wars and they know everything that there is to know about the Memphis Grizzlies and that city itself, if those two guys move on, Jackson will still be fine because they have some acceptable veterans, especially in a guy like Temple. That's there. Shelvin Mack is still there as well too. Even Noah, who again, say what you want about him, but I think he understands the breadth of his career arch right now. And I think he could be a guy to kind of help Jaren move forward in any form or fashion. But I'm interested because where are some destinations that you think either one of these two guys could go? It's there are a lot of conversations been had about both of them and potential landing spots. But is there a specific spot you see that fits best for Gasol and one that fits specifically for Conley as well?
I would love to see Marc Gasol in Miami. I I know that sounds crazy, but I think one of the biggest detriments to the Miami Heat, and the Miami Heat are starting to kind of turn the corner. They're playing much better basketball. They're finally getting something from Justice Winslow. Although I'm not completely, I'm not throwing all my chips on him. I think that if there's any expectation that this team, should they still maintain being in striking distance of getting in the playoffs, that you need to supplement this team with a guy that plays in that front court that can pass the basketball. They've been getting by with their backcourt play and seamlessly the fact that they've got some athleticism from their front court players, but these guys, their spacing, their ability to pass, they're one of the worst in the NBA. That's just my opinion. You bring a guy like Gasol there,
Mm.
who I really think can help out that front court for the Miami Heat. And I also believe as well too, that is the kind of player that a guy like D Wade, who comes off the bench, especially in the fourth quarters, can rely on when he penetrates, can get it to a guy that can get those easy perimeter shots. And Gasol can hit the occasional three. That's something that you can't get with Whiteside, right? So I like Gasol in Miami as one of those destinations.
It makes some sense. Not to poke holes in it, just to get a third team
No, of course
involved
you're not
because
going
I
to
don't
poke
think
holes in it.
Memphis would take.
Just don't. Yeah,
Uh,
just don't,
I just,
just don't
yeah, I
stab
think it's
me.
hard. I think it's hard for Memphis to want to take Whiteside back, in a deal for that too. But Miami's interesting because you could say they could also use Conley. Miami's also trying to get off of Goran Dragic deal as well too. And I think Conley would be a nice upgrade
They
for
can
them in
give up
that position. So
Johnson.
I think they're in the market.
They can throw. They can toilet
Uh,
Tyler
and
Johnson in
no,
that.
they want to, but nobody wants Johnson back. So, that's what the issue is. Nobody wants the players at the numbers that Miami signed these guys back at. So, but Miami, I think, would be in the market for both of those guys if they could find a way to convince Memphis that, yeah, these guys can be worth it, or they have to get a third team involved. I also feel like when it comes to Conley specifically, the Knicks are going to be an option, but not for anything to be positive this year. But it seemed like he and Fizdale got along, although Gasol and Fizdale did not. I think Fizz really liked Mike, and that might be something that the Knicks try to do. But we'll see. There was some rumors before the Oladipo injury that Indiana would be after Conley. There's some conversation about Andre Drummond being moved for Gasol. There's a
Oh
lot of
wait,
different
wait,
things
wait.
out
So let's talk about that. That was going to be our second topic of the drop. So let's talk about that, right? Victor Oladipo ruptures his tendon. He is clearly he's going to be gone for the rest of the season, and really uh, the likelihood that he's going to be available for 2019, 2020 is really going to be up in the air because based on that injury, um, there have been many reports saying that it's probably going to take into like the like almost at the trade deadline for him to get himself up to normal running speed. So if you are the Indiana Pacers, right, and you are the third best team in the Eastern Conference, and you're sold on the idea that you want to believe that Victor Oladipo is still will eventually and can still be the future for this basketball team, do you go on a soft sell on the idea that you're only going to buy for a short term?
It's hard because you would like it better this year if Oladipo was healthy. Now you kind of have to invest in Conley and then hope, a year from now, a year and a half from now, that Oladipo comes in and they mesh. So you're basically looking at trying to see results from a trade now, almost 2, 3 years out. And I think at this age, at Conley's age, although he's not old, I think it's probably too much of a risk. Had Oladipo not gone down, I think Conley makes a lot of sense for them, to try to be an upgrade and to really, really get a formidable combination of Conley, Oladipo, and Miles Turner, and even Sabonis, as a really great front four guys to be playing in the Eastern Conference to give a lot of teams some fits. But without Oladipo, and again, as you alluded to, with the uncertainty of exactly when he could come back, that makes that prospect that much tougher for the Pacers to go ahead and make that gamble, because now you got to pay Conley all that money. Yes, you have the cap space and things like nature next year, but are you realistically a destination that players want to come to, especially if Oladipo is not there? And Conley and Turner just aren't going to sell other guys. Ownership traditionally hasn't wanted to spend in that as well too, so that makes things very, very difficult. So I don't think Conley goes to Indiana now in lieu of Oladipo's injury.
All right, so then let's backtrack a little bit. We had our man Phil Watson jump on, right? He talks about how the Brooklyn Nets, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, given what this basketball team has done thus far, right? Um, do you stand pat? Or to your point, do you think they should be buyers by the trade deadline and should make a play for a guy like Mike Conley? I'm of the mindset that I don't think that they should do something like that. I think that if Kenny Atkinson can basically plug and play guys, from the G League to come in, then see what the rest of this can do. Because when you really look at the
Yeah.
rest of the Eastern Conference, the gap between them and the other teams that are vying for opportunities to get into the playoffs, the Brooklyn Nets have already proven to me that they are the better team, best equipped to maintain their status. Even if the Miami Heat improve, even if maybe the Charlotte Hornets and the Detroit Pistons and the Washington Wizards improve, I'm not as confident in their ability to sustain what they're trying to do than what I would see from what Kenny Atkinson has gotten from the Brooklyn Nets. But that still doesn't mean that once they do get into the playoffs, and I didn't get an opportunity to ask this question with Phil Watson, but the dynamic about how you play in the playoffs is completely different than what you're going to see in the regular season. And at some point, the Brooklyn Nets need to figure out who their alpha player is going to be. If it's going to be D'Angelo Russell, then he needs to start gearing himself up after the NBA All-Star weekend to start playing like the number one guy that Kenny Atkinson can lean on to get that team buckets, because that's what it's going to take for you to advance in the playoffs. You need a Giannis Antetokounmpo. You need a Kawhi Leonard. The Pacers, they're going to need their Victor Oladipo, whether it's Sabonis or it's Turner. If the 76ers, they need their Embiid. If it's the Celtics, they need their Irving or their Tatum. The Brooklyn Nets need to figure out who their alpha is going to be on that team, and they need to get him ready, because that's how they're going to win playoff games.
Yeah, well, I don't think Conley or Gasol are the answers to that in any situation, especially not Conley with Dinwiddie likely back this season, and Russell already there. it just doesn't seem like a smart investment for them. If they were to go of the two, I mean, Gasol makes a little bit more sense, but then you have the kind of like the prickly personality to go into that locker room that Phil alluded to is playing so well. And I don't know if Gasol fits there. So I don't think Brooklyn's a realistic destination for any of these two Grizzlies that are currently on the market right now. I will say one team though I think Gasol could potentially fit and go to, and I think that's maybe Charlotte. They are starving for a center, and they, at this point, have no intention of moving off of Kemba Walker. So there might be something that could work out there if they can get a Gasol deal done and get Kemba and Gasol together as a kind of a new duo for them. That'd be pretty interesting. Um, I'm pretty sure Washington would be interested as well too.
I was just gonna say that
I'm intrigued.
I think Beal and Gasol would be a very nice combination. Don't know if it would be a game
Yeah,
changer, but it would be a very nice combination.
yeah, and I'm also I think it's funny because we keep mentioning these teams. I think all of these are teams that could maybe look at one or both of those guys, but not they couldn't get both of them together, but they'd be looking at one or either, I
Do
should
you
say.
know who
With
you
Gasol
know who
or
I'd love to see? It's interesting when we were just talking before we were recording, about the rumors of things going on with the Detroit Pistons and chemistry and things of that nature. But you know who I would love to see playing for the Detroit Pistons with the combination of Drummond and Griffin? Mike Conley.
yeah, makes a lot of
I
sense.
think
Yeah.
Mike Conley paired up with those two dudes would be some really like will elevate the Detroit Pistons, I think, to another level, a playoff level, a sustainable
Mhm.
playoff level of basketball that I think Pistons fans are starving for. I think Pistons fans are tired of seeing the kind of talent come out on that court and it's just not clicking. This is a team that should not be 6 games below 500 right now. They should be at least 500
Yeah.
or a couple games over 500. Even with Dwayne and Dwayne Casey, we've made the argument Dwayne Casey is a legitimate coach. This team is not the worst, team defensively, but they certainly are a team that has struggled to score the ball offensively. And we already know where a lot of those issues are derived from it. Okay, certain guys are out of their position. Certain guys are out of their space. Mike Conley might be that kind of guy that puts everybody in their proper space for them to score the basketball a little bit better than what they've been doing.
Right. And again, it just goes back to what Memphis wants to get back in return for either of these guys. You could throw the Clippers again for one or both of these guys at some point. They Pat Beverly's fine, say Gilgis Alexander, he's fine, but Conley would be an upgrade. I think both positions. They don't have a great center right now. Harrell's playing great for them off the bench, so they could use Gasol in that lineup there as well too. And then of course you still have Phoenix and Orlando still starting for point guards. They're always going to be mentioned when it comes anytime a guy like Mike Conley is available.
All right, before we kind of finish up with our show, Shaw, we were talking about the Indiana Pacers, and I don't want to back, obviously we kind of bounce back and forth on this, but how far back do you think that the Indiana Pacers fall, where they are
Man,
positioned, if they don't make a play
yeah,
and shore up that roster by the trade deadline?
yeah, I can't see them holding on to home court. I think they'd probably fall back into a 6 or maybe even 7 seed. You would figure a team like both Boston and Philadelphia should be able to catch them now without Oladipo. But Nate McMillan has these guys playing in all cylinders, and they get great production. Bogdanovich has played great for them when Oladipo has been out, so he can supplement some of the scoring. Turner gets more touches as well. Sabonis obviously will get some more touches. And then I think even Darren Collison at the point guard position, he becomes a little bit different of a playmaker as well. But I'd like to see if they decide to do something. But them holding on to that 3 seed without Oladipo, that seems far fetched, bro. Like I don't know. What are your thoughts on it, man? How far do you see them falling, or do you think they can still maintain home court advantage in the Eastern
I think
Conference?
they're gonna fall, man. But listen, I'm of the mindset that Pritchard is gonna make a move. I really do. Um, it's
Yeah.
just really hard pressed for Indiana fans to see that this is a team that was in the playoffs last year. They were 1 game away from pulling off one of the biggest upsets in NBA history and knocking off a LeBron James team um, that he was a part of with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And I think the uncertainty is we don't know what's going to happen to Victor Oladipo, and it's just really hard to if they believed that Miles Turner can evolve and be that guy that can take up the slack of being the alpha for this team moving forward. whatever their intentions were when they brought Victor Oladipo a year ago, I mean, he clearly obliterated that mindset, so to speak. And so since Turner has not evolved to that point, you really have to start thinking about who is it? Because I don't know if Nate McMillan is the type of guy to instill that in Domantas Sabonis or whoever the next dude would possibly be. I think you got to go out and get a guy that has the hunger, that wants to be that. And then you let the chips fall where they may. I think that Indiana fans are going to be more than supportive and want to see Victor Oladipo come back to this basketball team. Remember, they've already suffered through this one time already with Paul George. But I think the difference is that Victor Oladipo is not going to have the same kind of mentality that Paul George had as he was coming to the weighing parts of his contractual agreement. And so I think if you're the Indiana Pacers, in order to maintain that enthusiasm, they got to stay playing at a high level. I think they make a play.
Yeah, I mean, but you got to give to get.
I
So,
know. It'll be interesting to see what they may have to sacrifice. Not even give. They have to sacrifice in order for that to take place.
But I don't think without Oladipo they're better than Philly or Boston. I don't think they're better than Philly or Boston even with Oladipo. Although the record obviously clearly indicates that they have been. It's interesting though because then they do become Brooklyn netish.
Right.
I don't know that they fall past Brooklyn, but they're right in that same category. And I still think they're better than Miami, even without Oladipo. So I think that 6th seed is right where they should probably fall to. But then they become a problem, you know what I mean, for any of those teams that end up with that 3 seed. And if that does become Philly or Boston moving into that 3 seed, even without Oladipo, that becomes a problem, I think, in the playoffs itself, because they're going to give you their maximum effort and they're still going to play hard. So I don't think there'll be a cakewalk, even if they do fall out of the top 3 in the Eastern Conference.
A lot to look forward to, man, especially as we get ourselves ready for NBA All-Star Weekend, which the Baseline NBA podcast will be out there doing our thing. Oh yeah.
Will we?
Yeah. The word is, rumors have it that the Baseline boys are going to be out there, shucking and jiving out there. Saying doing our thing, man. So definitely stay in tune with the Baseline. We'll keep you guys posted about a lot of the stuff that we'll be covering during NBA All-Star Weekend. For the Baseline, Callie Warren Show, we'd like to thank our special guest, Phil Watson from Nothing But Nets. Be sure to check out that blog. It's Nothing But Nets FS. Callie Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.